Today, we're going to look into 3 horrifying family massacre stories. Let's begin with the first one. Picture this: a sweet old grandmother wearing a polka dot dress, baking fresh pies for her family, always smiling and laughing. She looks like someone who would give you warm hugs and tell you bedtime stories. But what if I told you this same grandmother killed 11 people with poison and laughed about it when she got caught? What if I told you she did this for over 30 years and nobody suspected a thing? Meet Nanny Doss, also known as the Giggling Granny. She was one of America's most dangerous female killers, and her story will make you think twice about trusting a sweet smile. This is the true story of how one woman used love as a weapon and got away with murder for decades. Nanny Doss was born Nancy Hazel on November 4th, 1905, in Blue Mountain, Alabama. She came from a very poor farming family and was one of 5 children. Her father, James Hazel, was a mean and controlling man who ruled his house with fear. He made Nanny and her brothers and sisters quit school when they were very young so they could work on the farm. They had no education and were not allowed to see the outside world much. From a very young age, Nanny loved reading romance magazines. She would spend hours dreaming about finding the perfect husband and having a fairy tale love story. But real life was nothing like those magazines. When she was just 7 years old, something happened that some people think might explain the evil that came later. While riding on a train with her family, the train stopped suddenly and Nanny hit her head very hard on a metal seat. She was knocked out cold. After that day, she complained about bad headaches, blackouts, and sudden mood changes. Nobody knows if this head injury made her into a killer or if she was just born that way. As Nanny grew up, she wanted love more than anything else. She wanted to escape from her mean father and the hard life on the farm. When she was 16 years old, she thought she found her chance. She married a man named Charlie Braggs, who worked with her at a cloth factory. Her father liked Charlie because he lived with his mother and seemed like a good man. But Nanny's search for true love was just beginning. What followed next was a trail of death hidden behind wedding rings and sweet smiles. Nanny's first marriage to Charlie Braggs started in 1921. At first, they seemed happy together. They had 4 daughters and everything looked normal from the outside. But soon, things went very wrong. Charlie said Nanny drank too much alcohol and acted crazy sometimes. Nanny said Charlie was mean and wouldn't show her love. Both of these things might have been true. The real problem, though, was Charlie's mother. The couple lived with her, and Nanny hated her mother-in-law. The old woman was bossy and always got involved in their marriage. Things got worse and worse in their home. Then, between 1927 and 1929, something terrible happened. 2 of Nanny's 4 children died suddenly. Both deaths were blamed on food poisoning. Back then, children died more often, especially in poor areas, so nobody asked questions. There were no medical tests done on the children's bodies. But Charlie was suspicious. He felt deep down that Nanny had something to do with their children's deaths. By 1929, Charlie had enough. He took their oldest daughter, Melvina, and ran away, leaving Nanny with their youngest daughter, Florine. When he came back a year later, it wasn't to fix their marriage. He had found another woman and wanted nothing to do with Nanny anymore. He left the children with her and ended their marriage for good. After her divorce, Nanny was eager to start over. She didn't waste any time. She began answering ads in romance magazines from lonely men looking for wives. This is how she met her second husband, Frank Harrelson, in 1929. Their relationship started like a beautiful love story. full of poems and promises. But behind closed doors, Nanny was learning a deadly new skill. She started using poison, specifically arsenic and rat poison, which were easy to buy back then. Frank turned out to be a heavy drinker with a criminal past. Their marriage quickly became bad, but they stayed together for 16 years. Then, in 1945, after Frank got drunk and hit her, Nanny decided she had enough. She put rat poison in his corn whiskey. He died within a few days. Nobody questioned his death. The doctors said he died from liver problems, which made sense because he drank so much. Nanny collected his life insurance money and moved on. Later, she said she killed him because he was violent, but there was no police report about any abuse. There was only her word and her strange laugh. Frank Harrelson was just the beginning. In 1945, shortly after her second husband died, Nanny's daughter Melvina had a baby boy. Nanny was there in the hospital room. According to Melvina, she saw her mother stick a hat pin into the baby's head while she was sleepy from the medicine. The child died soon after birth. The doctors said it was natural, but Melvina was haunted by what she thought she saw. Things got even worse that same year. Melvina had another son named Robert. After an argument with her mother, Melvina left Robert with Nanny while she went out for the evening. When she came back, the baby was dead. Nanny said he just stopped breathing. Melvina later claimed she found papers showing that Nanny had bought a life insurance policy on the child. After this, Melvina and her mother's relationship became cold and distant. In 1945, another family member died. Nanny moved in with her sister Dovie, who had been sick for a long time and couldn't get out of bed. Within just a few days of Nanny's arrival, Dovie died suddenly. The death was called natural, and Nanny helped plan the funeral. She played the role of a sad sister perfectly. A few months later, Nanny's mother, Louisa Hazel, came to visit. Nanny welcomed her warmly, and the two women seemed to get along well. But within days, Louisa was also dead. Again, there was no investigation. Nobody suspected anything wrong. Deaths of elderly family members didn't raise red flags, especially when the grieving daughter explained everything so calmly. None of these deaths made anyone suspicious. Nanny was seen as a helpful, cheerful relative. She baked pies, took care of sick family members, and kept smiling through each loss. What nobody realized was that Nanny Doss was systematically getting rid of people who annoyed her, disappointed her, or simply got in her way. It didn't matter if they were husbands, children, or grandchildren. She wanted peace, comfort, and sometimes money. As long as nobody asked questions, she had no reason to stop. After killing Frank Harrelson, her grandchildren, her sister, and her mother, Nanny Doss felt confident. Her methods worked perfectly, clean, quiet, and impossible to detect. Best of all, nobody had questioned her. Poison became her favorite weapon. That same year, she answered another Lonely Hearts ad and married Arlie Lanning, a worker from Lexington, North Carolina. They had only known each other for a few days before getting married. Nanny moved into his home and immediately played the role of a sweet, church-going wife. To the neighbors, she was warm and friendly, always baking and always smiling. But inside the house, it was different. Arlie was a drinker and was often away from home. Nanny didn't like being ignored. Just like before, she began slowly poisoning his food. She mixed arsenic into meals, especially stews and soups where the bitter taste could be hidden. Arsenic poisoning looks like natural illness, upset stomach, throwing up, belly pain, and weakness. It can look like food poisoning or a sudden heart attack, especially if the person already had health problems. Arlie got sick over several weeks, slowly getting weaker and weaker. When he finally collapsed and died, the doctor said it was heart failure caused by years of drinking. Nobody suspected murder. After all, his loving wife had stayed by his side the whole time, baking, praying, and smiling. Soon after Arlie's funeral, the house they shared mysteriously burned to the ground. The house legally belonged to his family, but Nanny collected the insurance money. She then moved in with Arlie's elderly mother to take care of her. Within days, the old woman was dead too. Again, no autopsy, no questions asked. Nanny left North Carolina quietly and moved to Kansas in 1952. There, she met her fourth husband, Richard Morton, a clean, well-behaved man from Emporia. He didn't drink or gamble and seemed like the calm, stable man she had been looking for. But it still wasn't enough. Within months, Nanny discovered that Richard had been writing letters to other women. To her, this was betrayal, and for that, he had to die. She returned to her tried-and-true method. Small amounts of arsenic were added to his food over several days. At first, he seemed to have the flu. Then he got much weaker. He had an upset stomach, was throwing up, couldn't keep water down, and his organs began to fail. Within a week, Richard was dead. There was no investigation, just another widow grieving her late husband. By now, Nanny had killed 3 husbands using poison. Each time, she played the grieving wife perfectly. Each time, doctors thought the deaths were natural. And each time, Nanny moved on without any consequences. But her final victim would prove to be her last. The pattern she had perfected over decades was about to fall apart. In 1953, Nanny met her 5th and final husband, Samuel Doss, through a Lonely Hearts magazine. He was a clean, conservative man and a church minister from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He had recently lost his wife and one of his children in a tornado and was looking for companionship and stability. Nanny, as always, was looking for love. They married quickly, but things went bad almost right away. Samuel was strict and cheap. He expected Nanny to live simply and didn't allow her to read romance magazines or watch television, 2 of her favorite things. He even controlled how much money she could spend. To Nanny, he represented everything she hated in a partner: boring, controlling, and cold. She left him shortly after the wedding and went back to Alabama. But when Samuel said he was sorry and promised to change, she came back. But she had one condition. He had to add her name to his bank account and buy 2 life insurance policies with her as the person who would get the money if he died. In September 1954, shortly after she returned, Samuel was taken to the hospital with a severe stomach illness. He got better and went home, thinking he had survived food poisoning. But Nanny wasn't finished with him yet. On October 12, 1954, she served him another meal with arsenic in it. This time he died. What Nanny didn't expect was Samuel's doctor. The physician had been suspicious during Samuel's first illness. When the minister came back to the hospital and then died shortly after going home, the doctor ordered tests on his body. The results were clear. Large amounts of arsenic were found in his system. It was murder. The police came to question Nanny Doss. At first, she played the grieving widow, crying and shaking her head. But when they pressed her harder, something inside her snapped. She began to laugh. She confessed quickly, but not just to Samuel's murder. Over the following days, Nanny calmly and cheerfully admitted to killing 4 of her husbands. Then she added more names: her mother, her sister, 2 of her children, her grandson. The list grew longer with each interview. Nanny Doss had finally been caught, And for the first time in decades, the trail of death behind her was finally being discovered. Nanny Doss shocked investigators not with the details of her crimes, but with how casually she talked about them. She showed no guilt, no sadness, no fear. Instead, she smiled, laughed, and made jokes. During questioning, Nanny admitted to killing 4 of her 5 husbands.
Why are you in the penitentiary now?
All the time back to my husband.
Which, your last husband?
Yes, sir.
Did they say you killed any more?
Yes,
Or your other husband? Which other?
3 of them.
She gave reasons that to her made perfect sense. One husband cheated, another was too controlling, one wouldn't let her watch TV, another drank too much. She described their murders with calm detail and then giggled. "I was searching for the perfect mate," she said. "He wouldn't let me read my stories, so I put rat poison in his coffee," she added with a chuckle. Nanny Doss's arrest and confession shocked the entire country. It wasn't just the number of people she killed that shocked everyone. It was the way she confessed. The grandmother-like woman who wore flower dresses and baked pies had quietly murdered her way through at least 11 victims, all while smiling sweetly and laughing about it. At a time when most serial killers were thought to be men who were violent and mentally ill, Nanny challenged every idea people had. Her crimes weren't done in dark alleys or isolated places. They happened around the dinner table, in bedrooms, and on quiet porches. She used poison, slow, quiet, and hard to detect, and she used it on the people closest to her. The public reaction to the case was a mix of fascination and horror. Newspapers covered her story with shocking headlines. Reporters gave her nicknames that showed the difference between how she looked and what she did. The giggling granny, the jolly black widow, the self-made widow. She seemed to enjoy it, even posing for photos with a big smile. The media attention only made her strange behavior worse. Some newspapers ran photo spreads of Nanny smiling while in jail. Others published hand-drawn timelines of her 5 marriages, each ending in death. Despite her confession to 11 murders, Nanny Doss was only ever put on trial for one: the death of Samuel Doss. Why? Because Oklahoma had the strongest evidence and legal control. The state charged her with first-degree murder. She said she was guilty in May 1955. Given her confession and guilty plea, a trial wasn't needed. The judge sentenced her to life in prison. During the 1950s, women were rarely sentenced to death, especially in conservative states like Oklahoma. Juries and judges were often reluctant to give women the death penalty, particularly those who looked elderly, motherly, or harmless. Nanny Doss was a smiling, grandmother-like figure, which influenced how people saw her. Even though she confessed to multiple killings, her manner made many people less afraid of her. She wasn't the image of a cold-blooded killer that most people expected, even though she was exactly that. Prosecutors in other states, including North Carolina, Alabama, and Kansas, thought about charging her for the other murders. But at the time, it was common practice to skip multiple trials when the suspect was already serving life in prison. It was seen as unnecessary and expensive to move her between states, especially since she was no longer a danger to the public. The trial got massive press coverage, but only because of its strange tone. The image of a smiling grandmother calmly confessing to a string of poisonings fascinated the country. Nanny Doss spent the next 10 years in prison at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Even behind bars, she kept her cheerful personality. She spent her time reading romance magazines, doing needlework, and smiling for the occasional visitor or reporter. One prison worker later said, "You'd never guess she was a killer." She acted like someone's grandmother baking cookies for the church. When she asked if she could work in the kitchen, she was politely told no. But the giggling eventually stopped. On June 2nd, 1965, Nanny Doss died of leukemia in the hospital ward of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. She was 59 years old. Interestingly, she died exactly 10 years after she entered prison. She was buried in Oak Hill Memorial Park in McAlester, Oklahoma. There was no large funeral. Her story faded from headlines, but it never completely disappeared. People don't forget the smiling grandmother who poisoned her family and giggled about it. To this day, she remains one of America's most deadly female serial killers, and one of the few to have been convicted based entirely on a confession without ever standing trial for most of her victims. In the end, Nanny Doss's crimes left a haunting message. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like someone's grandmother. Sometimes they bring you a slice of pie and laugh while you eat it. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most harmless. The case of the giggling granny reminds us that evil can hide behind the sweetest smile. It shows us that we should never judge people only by how they look or act on the outside. Nanny Doss fooled everyone for over 30 years by being exactly what people expected a grandmother to be: kind, caring, and harmless. But underneath that sweet exterior was a cold-blooded killer who saw human life as disposable. She killed for money, for convenience, and sometimes just because people annoyed her. She never showed real remorse for what she did. Even when caught, she laughed about it like it was all just a big joke. This case also shows us how different times were back then. Today, multiple mysterious deaths in one family would immediately raise red flags. Autopsies would be performed, investigations would be launched, and patterns would be noticed. But in Nanny's time, people died more often from illness, and medical science wasn't as advanced. This allowed her to get away with murder for decades. The story of Nanny Doss proves that serial killers come in all shapes and sizes. They don't all look like the scary villains we see in movies. Sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who offers you a home-cooked meal with a warm smile. If this case disturbed you as much as it did us, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Leave a comment below and let us know. What other twisted cases would you like us to cover? Until next time, stay safe and remember that sometimes the most dangerous people are hiding in plain sight, wearing polka dot dresses and baking pies. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. They say mothers have a sixth sense about their children. But what if your biggest fear was that your own child might hurt others?
I looked at my best friend and said, I have a feeling my son killed everybody.
One man has been taken into custody accused of killing his wife, father, and grandmother.
How do you feel about your son?
I hate him. And that's a very, very strong word in my vocabulary. I don't ever use that word unless I necessarily definitely have to.
In June 2025, it started with a normal phone call to 911, a woman reporting trouble at home with her husband. Her voice was scared but calm as she tried to explain what was happening. Then everything changed in seconds. Loud bangs came through the phone, gunshots, then nothing but silence. When police rushed to the quiet house, they found something that would never leave their minds. 3 people were dead, shot by someone they trusted, someone they lived with every single day. The killer was still there, holding the gun, like he had nothing left to lose. But here's what makes this story so frightening. This wasn't some stranger who broke in. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was family. and every sign that something bad might happen was right there for years. People saw the warning signs but didn't know what they meant until it was too late. How does someone you live with become a killer? What makes a person cross that line? And why didn't anyone stop it before 3 innocent people died? The answers are hidden in a small town where neighbors thought they knew each other, but really didn't know anything at all. Grafton, New York is a small town where everyone knows each other. With only 2,000 people, it's the kind of place where nothing much happens. Families stay for generations. Kids play outside without worry. The biggest news might be the school football game or someone's new baby. This wasn't a place where you expected to see police cars racing down South Road with sirens blaring on a Wednesday evening. Yet that's exactly what happened on June 18th, 2025, when everything changed forever. At approximately 6:40 p.m., state police responded to a home on South Road at around 6:40 p.m. for a report of shots fired. But this wasn't just any emergency call. It had started as something much more routine, a domestic dispute that took a horrific turn. The call came from Whitney Fowler, a 27-year-old woman who lived in the house with her husband Joshua, his father Wilson, and his step-grandmother Anita. Her voice carried tension, but she remained calm enough to explain what was happening to the 911 dispatcher. Then, in the middle of her report, everything changed. Gunshots erupted through the phone line. The connection went silent. Within minutes, emergency responders were racing toward what would become one of the most shocking crimes in the county's recent history. When officers arrived at the modest home tucked behind trees on South Road, they found a scene that would haunt them forever. Whitney, 27, was one of 3 people fatally shot at a Rensselaer County home in Grafton on Wednesday evening, June 18th. She lay outside the house, her life ended by the very violence she had tried to report. Inside the home, 2 more bodies waited. Wilson Fowler, 55, Joshua's father, had been shot dead. So had 69-year-old Anita Crandall, Joshua's step-grandmother. Her husband, 26-year-old Joshua Fowler, is now charged with murder after allegedly gunning down Whitney, his father Wilson Fowler, 55, and his step-grandmother Anita Crandall, 69. But perhaps the most chilling part of the scene was what officers found next. Standing outside the house, holding the weapon that had just claimed 3 lives, was Joshua Fowler himself. He made no attempt to run. He didn't try to hide what he had done. According to reports, he was reportedly hoping police would end his life in a suicide by cops scenario. The weapon in his hands was a rifle that belonged to his father, legally owned and kept in the house. Officers ordered him to drop it, but he refused. For tense moments, the standoff continued until officers used tasers to subdue him without further bloodshed. Just like that, the killing spree was over. But the questions had only begun. Who was Joshua Fowler, and how had he reached this point? The answers weren't simple, but they weren't entirely hidden either. In fact, looking back, the warning signs had been there for years. Joshua had grown up in that house on South Road. Neighbors remembered him as a quiet kid who stayed by himself. He didn't cause trouble, but he didn't make friends either. While other children played together, Joshua watched from far away. In school, teachers said he was an average student who seemed distant. He would sit in the back, do his work, but never join discussions. During breaks, he stood alone while other kids played. Some teachers thought he was just shy. Others felt something deeper was wrong, but nobody pushed to find out. As he got older, the disconnect got worse. Other students made friends and dated. Joshua stayed isolated. His grades were okay, but he showed no interest in anything. When classmates talked about college and careers, Joshua seemed to have no plans at all. After high school, most of his classmates left town for college or jobs. Joshua simply stayed home. He didn't look for work or go to school. He just lived in his childhood bedroom while years passed by. To neighbors, he seemed like another small-town guy who never found his way. But his family saw something more troubling. His mother, Eleanor Crandall, had been worried about her son for years. She and Wilson had separated when Joshua was younger, and she had eventually moved out of state. But even from a distance, she could sense the darkness growing in her son. The mood swings were getting worse. The angry outbursts were becoming more frequent, and the way he could go completely silent during conversations was deeply unsettling. Years before the murders, Eleanor had voiced her fears to Wilson in stark terms. Joshua was going to kill someone someday. It wasn't a dramatic accusation born from a moment of anger. It was a mother's genuine terror about what her son might be capable of. But Wilson didn't believe her, or perhaps he couldn't let himself believe it. He thought Joshua just needed structure, discipline, and a firm hand. That was how Wilson had been raised, and that was how he tried to raise his son. But Joshua wasn't responding to traditional parenting approaches. Instead of getting better, he was getting worse. And rather than seeking professional help, the family buried the problems beneath layers of silence and shame. It's a pattern that repeats in far too many households across America. The belief that family problems should stay within the family, even when those problems are becoming dangerous. When Whitney entered Joshua's life, she brought light to his dark world. Whitney Lundgren was everything Joshua wasn't. She was happy, warm, and full of dreams. Where Joshua saw problems, Whitney saw chances. Where he stayed quiet, she filled rooms with laughter. Whitney came from a loving family that supported her goals. She was kind to everyone and always looked for the good in people. Her father, Wayne Lundgren, said she wouldn't hurt anyone.
Always tried to help people when she could. Would actually put people in front of her own problems.
She wanted to become a pediatric nurse and help sick children. She was smart and caring, exactly what hospitals looked for in nurses. Her teachers remembered her as someone who really cared about her patients. When she met Joshua, her friends and family were confused. Whitney was outgoing and had clear goals. Joshua was withdrawn and had no plans. She was surrounded by friends and opportunities. He was alone and unemployed. But Whitney saw something in Joshua that made her want to help him. Maybe she thought her love could fix whatever was wrong with him. It's common for caring people to think they can heal broken souls. In the beginning, Joshua might have seemed better with Whitney around. He may have been more social and hopeful. This gave Whitney hope that she was helping him change. But what Whitney didn't understand was that surface changes often hide deeper problems. While Joshua might have acted better to keep Whitney happy, his real issues from childhood were still there. The anger, the isolation, the inability to connect with people. Love alone couldn't cure these things. They moved in together in the house on South Road with Wilson and Anita. Whitney probably thought this was temporary, a way to save money while building their relationship. She likely saw it as a step toward the independent life she'd always planned. When they got married, Whitney hoped this would be a new beginning. Maybe she thought marriage would motivate Joshua to find work and engage with life more. But instead of getting better, things got worse almost immediately after the wedding. Whitney wasn't the type to complain openly or air her private struggles, but those close to her began to notice changes. She became more guarded, less spontaneous. The bright spark in her voice started to dim. Her father, Wayne, began to worry when Whitney would call home with vague updates about Joshua having a rough week or being upset about something small. She would mention giving him space, dealing with his moods, trying to be understanding. She never said directly that she was scared, but her silence spoke volumes. Wayne encouraged his daughter to leave if she felt unsafe. Whitney admitted she had looked into domestic violence shelters, just in case, but each time she ultimately stayed. It's a heartbreaking pattern seen in countless abusive relationships, the victim hoping things will get better, making excuses for their partner's behavior, and gradually becoming isolated from the support systems that could help them escape. The problems at the Fowler house weren't completely hidden from authorities. CBS 6 has learned about at least 3 different runs by law enforcement to investigate Joshua Fowler before the triple homicide on June 18, 2025. Police had been called to the home multiple times over the years for domestic disputes and family arguments, but each incident was treated as isolated rather than part of a larger pattern of escalating violence. In July 2018, officers responded to a fight between Joshua and his father, Wilson. When they arrived, the family downplayed the incident as just a disagreement, and no arrests were made. Then, in October 2021, police were called again, this time for an incident involving Joshua and Whitney. Once again, the situation was defused temporarily, but no real intervention took place. These missed opportunities haunt investigators and advocates alike. Each police response represented a chance to connect the family with resources that might have changed the outcome. But without victims willing to press charges or family members ready to admit the severity of the problems, law enforcement's hands were often tied. By spring 2025, those closest to Whitney noticed she was pulling away from friends and social activities. She spent more time at home and seemed increasingly isolated. When she did go out, she appeared distracted and frequently checked her phone. The confident, vibrant woman her friends remembered was fading away, replaced by someone who seemed to be walking on eggshells in her own life. Meanwhile, Joshua's behavior was becoming more erratic. He wasn't working and rarely left the house. Neighbors noticed him sitting on the porch for hours without speaking to anyone, or pacing around the property in apparent agitation. Some days he would disappear into his room and not emerge for long stretches. The isolation and inactivity seemed to be feeding whatever darkness was growing inside him. In the days leading up to June 18th, there were no new police reports or obvious signs that violence was imminent, but something had clearly shifted. The tension that had been building for years was reaching a breaking point. When the moment finally came, it erupted with shocking suddenness. Whitney's 911 call captured the transition from what seemed like another domestic argument to deadly violence. Her calm report of a domestic dispute was interrupted by the sound of gunshots, and then silence. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the tragedy. The Rensselaer County District Attorney's Office said Joshua Fowler, 26, of Cropseyville, is facing 1 count of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder. The first-degree murder charge likely relates to the deliberate nature of the killings and the fact that multiple victims were involved. Joshua Fowler pleads not guilty in Grafton triple homicide, setting the stage for what will undoubtedly be a complex legal proceeding. His defense team will likely focus on mental health issues and his history of untreated psychological problems, while prosecutors will argue that regardless of his mental state, he made the conscious decision to take 3 innocent lives. The community response has been one of shock and grief, but also uncomfortable recognition. Many residents have admitted they noticed warning signs but didn't know how to respond or whom to call. The tragedy has sparked conversations about domestic violence, mental health resources, and the responsibility communities have to intervene when they see troubled situations developing. For Whitney's family, no legal outcome can restore what was lost. Her father, Wayne, has spoken publicly about his daughter's dreams of helping children as a pediatric nurse.
Fun-loving person, always tried to stay positive, always tried to help people when she could, would actually put people in front of her own problems.
This case shows a bigger problem in America. Family murders are happening more often than people realize. In 2024 alone, there were over 90 cases where family members killed their own relatives. That means every 4 days, a family was destroyed by someone they trusted. Experts say these crimes usually involve men with untreated mental health problems, money troubles, and a history of controlling behavior. The killers are often isolated and feel like they've lost control of their lives. When they can't handle their problems anymore, they sometimes decide to kill their families too. What makes these cases so sad is that they don't happen suddenly. They build up over months or years as the person's mental state gets worse. Family members often notice strange behavior but don't realize it's a warning sign of violence. Joshua's case fits this pattern perfectly. He had been isolated and angry for years. He wasn't working and felt like a failure. When Whitney tried to get help by calling 911, it was already too late to stop what years of untreated problems had created. What makes these cases particularly tragic is how preventable many of them are. The warning signs are usually present for months or years before the violence erupts. But family members often minimize the danger. Victims feel trapped by fear or financial dependence, and communities struggle with knowing when and how to intervene in private family matters. The Fowler case serves as a stark reminder that domestic violence can escalate to deadly levels quickly and without obvious warning. Whitney's decision to call 911 that evening suggests she recognized the immediate danger. But by then it was too late for the intervention that might have saved her life and the lives of Wilson and Anita. As the legal proceedings continue, the focus will inevitably turn to questions of mental health, family dynamics, and whether this tragedy could have been prevented. Joshua's mother, Eleanor, has spoken publicly about her long-standing fears about her son, expressing grief not only for the victims, but for the son she feels she lost long before the murders occurred. The ripple effects of the June 18th murders continue to spread through the Grafton community. Residents report feeling less secure in their homes, more aware of the potential for violence in seemingly normal families, and more committed to checking on neighbors who might be struggling. The Fowler house on South Road stands empty now, a reminder of how quickly lives can be shattered and families destroyed. For those driving past, it serves as a sobering monument to the importance of taking warning signs seriously and the devastating consequences when help comes too late. The case remains active as Joshua awaits trial, but the broader lessons are already clear. Mental health resources need to be more accessible and less stigmatized. Domestic violence education should be widespread and ongoing, and communities need to develop better systems for intervening when they recognize families in crisis. Most importantly, the voices of victims like Whitney need to be heard and believed when they reach out for help. Her 911 call represented a moment of courage in what was likely a long period of fear and isolation. Though it came too late to save her, it stands as a testament to the strength it takes for victims to speak up against those who threaten them. The Fowler family murders will be remembered as more than just another true crime story. They represent a failure of multiple systems designed to protect vulnerable people, and a reminder that behind every statistic about domestic violence is a real person whose life could have been saved with the right intervention at the right time. As this case moves through the legal system, The hope is that lessons will be learned and changes will be made to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. But for Whitney, Wilson, and Anita, those changes come too late. Their lives serve as a reminder of what's at stake when warning signs are ignored and help doesn't come in time. This tragedy makes us think about important questions. Could someone have prevented these deaths if they had acted on the warning signs? What should we do when we notice troubling behavior in families around us? If you or someone you know is in danger from domestic violence, help is available. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-79-923. Don't wait until it's too late. What do you think about this case? Could this have been stopped? Subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. It was 1:55 in the morning when a 43-year-old man in Florida got a video call. The call was from his girlfriend's young children. He knew right away that something was very wrong. It was way too late for kids to be awake on a school night. He was sleepy, but scared. He answered the call. What he heard made his blood run cold. The children were crying and saying things that didn't seem real. He had to find out what was happening. He rushed to his girlfriend's house. What he found there would stay with him forever.
We woke up to the sheriff's knocking on the door, asking for information if we had anything on our security cameras. No idea what happened over there. It's awful.
This story takes place in Cocoa, a small city in Florida. About 19,000 people live there. The city is known for its peaceful nature and being close to the Kennedy Space Center. People there often see rocket launches light up the night sky. Life moves slowly and peacefully. There's a local story about how the city got its name. Long ago, a woman lived by the river. She would give hot cocoa to sailors who passed by. The sailors would call out, "Cocoa! Cocoa!" when they arrived. This story shows that the city has always been a welcoming place. Crime rates in Cocoa are usually lower than in most places. The city is known more for tourism and beaches than for violence. But in early 2023, something terrible happened. A crime so bad that it shocked the whole community. It was a mild night in March 2023. At 1:55 a.m. on Wednesday, March 1st, Kevin was sleeping in Rockledge, Florida. Suddenly, his phone rang and woke him up. It was a video call from his girlfriend, Constance's 15-year-old daughter, Kiara. But when Kevin answered, Kiara wasn't on the screen. Instead, he saw her two little brothers. They were only 6 and 9 years old. The boys told him they had woken up to strange sounds. They heard noises and screaming. When they looked around, they found their family members hurt badly. They were not moving. Kevin drove to Constance's home right away. He stayed on the phone with the boys the whole time. When he got to the house, he went through the front door. Right away, he saw 2 adults on the floor. They were not moving. His first thought was to get the boys to safety. He moved them to his car. Later, other family members took care of the boys. Kevin went back into the house to call 911.
My girlfriend's son just called me and said his parents were dead. I just got over to the house because I didn't know what was going on. The grandma, the mom, the dad, and the sister are all dead, and the boys are the only ones alive. There's blood all over the place.
Officers from the sheriff's office quickly arrived at the house. They went through the front door. One officer went into the north bedroom. He found an elderly woman lying on a bed. She'd been hurt badly. The woman was 63-year-old Glenda Terwilliger. She was the family's grandmother. She had been living in Cocoa with her daughter Constance and her 3 grandchildren. As officers searched the house, they found more victims. In the living room, they found a man and woman lying next to each other on the floor. They were Glenda's daughter, Constance, age 35, and her ex-boyfriend, 36-year-old Michael Watson. Michael was the father of the two little boys. Another officer went to the south bedroom. There, he found another victim lying on a bed. This was 15-year-old Kiara. She'd been hurt badly, just like the others. This was especially sad. 3 generations of women had been lost that night. A grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. All gone in one violent event. No suspects were found in the house. Police set up barriers around the scene. Meanwhile, neighbors heard the shocking news. They reacted with horror and sadness.
I feel for the kids that were in the home and had to witness this. I'm sure it's going to affect them for a really long time. That's what's sad.
The crime scene team started working. Officers talked to Kevin, who gave them important information about the victims. He told them their names and how they were related. When police asked about possible problems involving the victims, Kevin mentioned one person, a man named Domenico Gigante, who was 36 years old. Kevin explained that Domenico was Chiara's biological father. He lived at a different address. Chiara was born from a brief relationship between Domenico and Constance. Kevin said that Chiara's relationship with her father was very troubled. She had anger toward him because he had been absent for most of her life. Recently, Domenico had tried to reconnect with his daughter, but Chiara didn't want a relationship with him. Kevin added that he had last spoken to Constance the night before. During their conversation, Constance told him that Domenico had sent Chiara a rude text message that day. Kevin knew that Constance had been having ongoing problems with Domenico about Chiara. Constance had said that all communication between Domenico and Chiara should happen over the phone, not in person. This information made police consider Domenico a person of interest. The case was then given to the homicide unit. The investigators had to find out who wanted to hurt the victims. They needed to understand why someone would harm them. And they had to figure out exactly how the crime happened. At 3:48 a.m., detectives arrived at the scene. After getting a search warrant, they entered the crime scene. The detectives noticed damage to the front door. There was also a boot print near the door. These were clear signs that someone had forced their way into the house. They collected a lot of evidence. This included shell casings, samples for DNA testing, and photographs of the scene. Research into Domenico's background revealed concerning information. He had lived in New Jersey and Florida. But the most shocking thing was his criminal history. He had serious charges like assault, battery, and even animal cruelty. These aren't small crimes. They're major red flags. Experts say they show violent tendencies that get worse over time. Detectives found out that Domenico lived in Rockledge. A silver 1998 Dodge pickup truck was registered in his name. He worked part-time delivering newspapers. He had been doing this job for 6 years. While searching the neighborhood, a detective noticed a surveillance camera at a nearby house. The homeowner let police look at the footage. The video showed something very important. A silver Dodge pickup truck arrived at the victim's house at 1:19 a.m. The driver turned off the headlights as the truck drove onto the property. Just 2 minutes later, there was a loud bang. Officers believe this was the sound of the front door being forced open. Over the next 71 seconds, 9 shots were heard. Then the person returned to the truck and drove away. With this information, 2 detectives went to Domenico's house. They arrived at 11:22 a.m. Their goal was to tell him about his daughter's passing and watch how he reacted.
Is your daughter's name Kiara? Kiara? Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, we found her deceased today. What? Is this a joke? It's not a joke. No, sir. What? Huh? It's not a joke.
Oh, what happened?
We're still actively trying to figure that out.
Well, we would be hoping that you would be able to help us out with that as well. Would you mind coming down to the precinct and talking with us?
Not at this time. I need to process this. This is,
Dominic, they need to talk to you. You need to go.
According to police records, officers were suspicious of Domenico's reaction to the news. They noted that he acted like he was in disbelief, but he didn't get emotional. Shortly after, when Domenico and his roommate went back inside, the roommate asked him directly, "Did you do this?" Domenico responded, "Yes. I hurt her 3 times. It's just you and me now. We have to stick together." After they came back from the house, detectives drove them to the station in separate cars. One officer noted that during the ride, Domenico showed no emotion. He didn't show any concern for his daughter. Instead, he talked about other topics. The roommate was upset and emotional. He shared important information with the officer. He said that the night before, around 11:30 p.m., Domenico was very angry because Chiara wasn't communicating with him. The roommate said Domenico had stated, "I guess I'm just going to have to go over there and hurt them all." The roommate explained, "Maybe I should have known." But it just seemed like another one of his fits. The roommate was able to provide doorbell camera footage from his house. The video showed Domenico entering his silver truck while holding a weapon. This was 23 minutes before the incident took place. The camera also captured Domenico returning home roughly 19 minutes after the last shot was heard. With all this evidence, detectives knew it was time to question Domenico directly. 2 detectives read Domenico his rights. He agreed to speak with them. When asked when he last saw Chiara in person, Domenico said it was around 2 p.m. on Monday, 35 hours before the incident. She had a doctor's appointment which kept her home from school. Domenico described himself as someone with no friends who doesn't leave the house at night unless it's for work. He said he followed his usual routine on Tuesday night, going to bed at 6 p.m., waking up at 1 a.m., and preparing for work. He denied leaving his house or using any weapons that night. After noting the differences in Domenico's statements, it was time for the detective to confront him. "Domenico, you said you didn't go anywhere, but the doorbell camera at your house shows you leaving in your vehicle last night. Why did you lie about that?" Domenico replied, "Oh, I must have forgotten. I went to a friend's house." The detective responded, "Can you provide contact information so we can confirm that?" "I don't have it," said Domenico. The detective pressed further. "The footage also shows you carrying a weapon while getting into your vehicle. Can you explain that?" As silence filled the room, Domenico shifted in his seat. Then he said, "I'm done. I don't want to talk anymore." Shortly afterward, the sheriff held a press conference to update the public.
And what I will tell you is that about an hour ago, our agents arrested Domenico Claude Gigante. He's 36, out of Rockledge. He was charged with 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder.
This is an extremely violent individual with a violent past dating back to 2005. He should have never been on our streets where he could harm this family. In 2005, he was arrested for domestic violence. In 2008, he was arrested for animal cruelty. In 2012, he was arrested for assault with a weapon. I have said this before.
If you're evil enough to harm an animal, you're evil enough to harm a human. And unfortunately, the exclamation point has been put on that statement today.
Gigante is the biological father of Chiara, the 15-year-old victim, and was formerly in a relationship with Constance, the mother. While waiting to be transported to jail, Domenico asked officers if he could speak with his roommate one last time. The conversation was recorded. The first thing Domenico asked was, "Did you tell the police anything?" "I told the truth," said the roommate. "Why?" replied Domenico. "Because you did something horrible," said the roommate. In a jail call 5 days later, Domenico asked his roommate to take the blame for the crimes. He also mentioned plans to claim he was not mentally well. Weeks later, Domenico was charged by a grand jury with 4 counts of first-degree homicide and 1 count of burglary. Prosecutors announced plans to seek the maximum punishment. In Florida, first-degree homicide is a serious crime. It can be punished by life in prison without parole or the maximum penalty. Domenico's case is still moving through the legal system. A hearing is set for March 6, 2025. At this hearing, prosecutors and the defense will update the judge on the case's progress. As the legal process continues, the goal remains the same: finding the truth, holding those responsible accountable, and offering closure to those affected by this tragedy. This case shows us the worst of human nature. A father who should have protected his daughter instead became her attacker. He didn't just hurt her, he destroyed an entire family: a grandmother, a mother, a daughter, and a stepfather, all gone in minutes. The 2 young boys who survived will carry this trauma for the rest of their lives. They lost their mother, their grandmother, their sister, and their father in one terrible night. What makes this case even more disturbing is Domenico's complete lack of emotion. After hurting 4 people, including his own daughter, he showed no remorse. He tried to manipulate others, and even asked his roommate to take the blame. This reminds us why it's important to pay attention to warning signs. Domenico had a long history of violence against animals and people. As the sheriff said, someone who can hurt animals will hurt humans. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think the roommate should have taken Domenico's threats more seriously? This case teaches us several important lessons about recognizing dangerous behavior patterns. First, we see how a history of animal cruelty can be a strong predictor of violence toward humans. Mental health experts have long studied this connection. When someone shows cruelty toward defenseless animals, it often indicates they lack empathy and can escalate to harming people. Second, the case shows us how important it is to take threats seriously. When Domenico told his roommate he was going to hurt them all, the roommate thought it was just another angry outburst. But looking back, this was a clear warning sign that should have been reported to authorities. The investigation also revealed warning signs that had been building for years. Domenico's criminal history included domestic violence, assault, and animal cruelty dating back to 2005. This pattern of escalating violence is common among people who eventually commit serious crimes. Each incident was a missed opportunity for intervention. The impact on the surviving children cannot be overstated. These 2 young boys witnessed the aftermath of unimaginable violence. They lost their entire family in one night. Child psychologists say that trauma like this can affect development, relationships, and mental health for decades to come. The boys will need extensive counseling and support. They may struggle with survivor's guilt, wondering why they lived when their family did not. They may have trouble trusting adults or forming healthy relationships. The community and extended family will play a crucial role in their healing process. This case also highlights the importance of surveillance technology in modern crime solving. The doorbell camera footage provided crucial evidence that directly contradicted Domenico's lies. Without this technology, the the case might have been much harder to solve. More and more crimes are being solved with help from security cameras and doorbell cameras. The investigation moved quickly because of good police work and clear evidence. The detectives followed proper procedures, gathered solid evidence, and built a strong case. The confession to the roommate, the surveillance footage, and the physical evidence all pointed to the same conclusion. Community members in Cocoa were shocked by the violence. This quiet city had rarely seen such brutal crimes. Local residents started installing more security systems and checking on their neighbors more often. The sense of safety that people had felt for years was shattered. The case also shows how domestic disputes can escalate into deadly violence. What started as a disagreement between Domenico and his daughter became a massacre of an entire family. This escalation pattern is seen in many family violence cases across the country. Mental health experts who studied the case noted several concerning behaviors. Domenico showed no emotion when told about his daughter's death. He showed no remorse after confessing to the crimes. He even tried to manipulate his roommate into taking the blame. These behaviors suggest a personality disorder that makes it difficult to feel empathy for others. The legal system will now work to ensure justice for the victims. The prosecution is seeking the maximum penalty, which reflects the serious nature of the crimes. The case will likely take months or years to fully resolve through the courts. For the surviving family members and friends, the legal process can be both necessary and difficult. They want to see justice served, but they also have to relive the trauma through court proceedings. Victim advocates will work with them to help them through this process. The case serves as a reminder that we must pay attention to warning signs of violence. When someone has a history of hurting animals or people, when they make threats, when they show no empathy, these are red flags that should not be ignored. If you notice these warning signs in someone you know, it's important to report them to authorities. You might feel like you're overreacting, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Law enforcement agencies have resources to investigate threats and protect potential victims. Remember, if you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, there are resources available to help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-7997-233. They provide confidential support and can connect you with local resources. Don't ignore the warning signs. Violence often gets worse over time, and what starts as threats can become deadly. Early intervention can save lives and prevent tragedies like the one that happened to the Terwilliger family. The story of what happened in Cocoa that night will not be forgotten. It serves as a painful reminder of how quickly violence can destroy lives and families. But it also shows the importance of good police work, community support, and taking threats seriously. The two surviving boys deserve a chance to heal and build new lives. With the right support and care, they can overcome this tragedy and find peace. Their story is not over. It's just beginning a new chapter. Thank you for watching this difficult but important story. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to stay safe and watch out for each other out there.